Welcome to Talkin Science, where we dive into the stories making headlines in the world of science and space even. I'm Matt Miller. Dr. Brad Tucker is here. Brad, happy Tuesday.
How's it going?
In this, the 32nd week of 2021, the shocking moment. Kepler caught the end of a massive yellow star. An X-ray image of a black hole, V404 Cygni, captures rings of material being shot out. And seat sale. Virgin Galactic put tickets up for grabs for their next space flights.
This is Trekzone's Talkin Science. And you can get exclusive behind-the-scenes info and first-play access to all Trekzone podcasts by becoming a member today. Click join on every Trekzone video on YouTube. Go to the trek.zone/support or scan the QR code on screen throughout the show. Now, it's back to you, Matt.
Well, thank you very much, Ross. Ross, our voiceover guy. And, of course, social media. Search for Trekzone on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and your favourite podcast feed. Like, follow, and subscribe. Leave comments and ratings. That's the best thing you can do to help us get recognised by the almighty algorithm. Of course, Dr. Brad on Twitter as well, at btucker22, and on Facebook, Dr. Brad Tucker. Brad, Venus and the Moon are putting on a bit of a joint show on Wednesday this week, making for some good observing just after sunset.
Yeah, it's Venus has been bright in the early evening sky towards the west, and now that the moon is just coming out of its new moon phase, it will join it pretty close together around 6 p.m. your local time, as you said, after sunset, and it'll be visible everywhere. So you'll see the very bright object Venus, and kind of right next to it will be the moon. Hopefully that is self-explanatory there. But yeah, it's always a great thing, especially as people are somewhat stuck in lockdown and can't go anywhere in various parts. It's a great thing to see. And we'll have this for a few months. That happens kind of in the second week of the next few months. We'll get this repetition. So it's not even if you just miss it tonight or Wednesday night, you'll be able to see it again next month.
Very exciting. Get your telescopes and binoculars out. Alrighty, let's get into the show. First up in our headlines, Starliner. Poor Starliner. It may be ground indefinitely as another glitch scrubs another launch attempt. That's 2 from 2 in this latest effort, Brad.
Yeah, look, they rough go is not even the way to say it here. Once after the whole Russian module fiasco delaying it, and then they got to launch pad as they were starting to fuel up. They had a problem with one of the valves on the first go, so they postponed it a day. And that is fairly common. They do a lot of these safety checks, not even just Boeing and ULA, but everyone does this. They did it again the next day. Same problem, didn't get better, and now they're trying to figure out exactly what are the problems, how to solve them, and how long it takes. They're now just hoping for an August launch. But there has been no refined time. So, yeah, poor Boeing. That's all we can really say.
Exactly right. It's gone from a specific day to hopefully this month to, I guess it's going to be hopefully next year or this year at some point. Poor Boeing. Well, the astronauts on the space station got into the Olympic spirit in the past few days, with the crew showing off some funky zero-gravity moves.
Look, I thought that was kind of fun, right? Towards the end of the closing ceremony, especially since they have a French astronaut, as we're seeing here, celebrating the Paris Olympics, trying to do something fun. And so obviously they can't really do running the same way. The high jump isn't really applicable. So they did their own version of zero or micro G Space Olympiads. We'll see if this is a trend that catches on in the future Olympics.
Absolutely. Brisbane 2032, here we come. Into our stories of the week now, and let's start with something you and a student of yours discovered. Kepler spotted a massive yellow star in the constellation of Cancer going supernova.
Yeah, so this is, one of the big things that I was doing with the Kepler Space Telescope is as part of this project to find supernova essentially as they explode. Kepler took an image every 30 minutes, so it could see planets moving quite quickly across the sky and their star. But in this case, it sees supernova and stars as explode 30 minutes within explosion and every 30 minutes thereafter. And one supernova we found as part of this big last bang of Kepler, which was dedicated to finding supernova, was a yellow supergiant, and what we were able to see is what we call, a technical term is called the shock cooling curve, and that is as the shock wave goes through the star, and it's the shock wave that ignites the star, you're able to see it travel through and into space, really giving us the most complete detail and picture of the first moments of a star exploding.
Now, we saw the initial brightening phase. That was the start of the supernova, of course, in 2016. But only now have we seen the full shockwave and subsequent explosion, Brad.
That's right. In 2016, we saw one of the first ones of these, what we call the shock breakout. That very first moment, the shock literally breaks out of the star. But that's really a quick flash, and you really need to see the whole shock wave come through. But with that one that we previously saw was a red supergiant. Really, the strength of the shock wave is somewhat proportionate to the size of the star, how long it travels through and how big and how much stuff it has to travel through. And because that red supergiant was a bit fainter and a bit smaller, we didn't really see the rest of that shock wave going through. Now, in this case, because these yellow supergiants and their size, we were able to see that size. It wasn't absorbed by the really big photosphere, as we call it, of a red supergiant. And look, it's really exciting to me. This is what I actually work on, but it really tells us exactly the process of how these massive stars explode. And theoretically, in calculations wise, we had thought this was the process for the better part of 30 years. But to be able to physically see it unfolding in minutes, really to hours, is a really remarkable feat and a really beautiful data set. And it was really some great work by my student, Patrick.
Well, we've talked about astronomical observing in the past, about being in the right place at the right time, and Kepler was exactly that for this moment across 2016 and 2017.
That's right. And, the way you kind of do this is we don't know when a star is going to explode. We don't know what star is going to explode in what galaxy. But what we do know is in a average galaxy, a star explodes about once per 100 years. So you stack the deck. You don't wait 100 years. You monitor 100 galaxies. You should get about a supernova a year. You monitor 10,000 galaxies. You should get about 100 supernova per year, which means in 3 months you get maybe a couple of dozen. And that's exactly what we were. You don't know what's going to come up. You don't know where. We don't know how far. So you try and observe as many as you can. And that, again, was one of the power of Kepler, was able to look at such a big chunk of sky all the time. You can see lots of galaxies simultaneously and wait for the right one.
Very cool. Brad, next up, V404 Cygni has been captured in X-ray, and it's blowing some rings out into space.
Yeah, V404 Cygni has really been studied for quite a while, and it had this last big outburst a number of years ago. And since this outburst, it's been studied quite a bit. And in this latest data coming, as he said, from an X-ray observatory, they're able to see what really is these concentric rings. And what it actually is light, these rings of dust that surround a black hole. Now, generally, they're invisible to the colors of light we can see in most light. But as the energy and the light travels through from the black hole through these rings, they light up, kind of glowing behind. And you're able to see the shells of what it really is dust, bits of stuff that have been blown off or shot around from this black hole through space.
Now, it's possible this is a result of a misalignment between the spin of the black hole and its companion star, leading to so-called frame dragging. What's that, Brad?
Yeah, and it's a really cool thing. So frame dragging was, again, one of these pesky things predicted by Einstein, confirmed by the gravity probe B, maybe a better part of a decade and a half ago. But that is actually, there's literally a warp in space-time. That is, if you kind of imagine that imagine you're dragging your finger through some water and it kind of leaves ripples behind. Massive objects can essentially do this as well, but to the fabric of space-time. So not only are you warping the space as an object travels through it, but the time as well. And we've seen this effect, as I said, with the gravity probe B, and to see it potentially as a much bigger scale from a black hole, because with gravity probe B, we are really just able to see the effect of Earth dragging through its gravitational effects around nearby space. This would be obviously much bigger and on a very big different time scale.
Now, the image at the start of our overlay there is a 2015 outburst. As you say, there's been a few that we've seen over the years. Now, that one caught the eye of astronomers, but it's only been released, it's only recently been released in a composite style. What does this show us, Brad?
And look, what we're really trying to understand is how not only is a black hole formed, but what activity can a black hole have? We view black holes as just kind of these things that sit there and suck things in. Well, that's not necessarily the case. They have to be created somehow. Generally, they're sometimes created by big stars as they just formed. But they also do have other bits of stuff around it, stars, galaxies. Sometimes we see it in the form of accretion disk, is very hot flowing material around it. Others, we don't really see much of it, but again, we kind of know it's there. So we're able, through these sorts of things, able to probe just the quantity, the size, and the composition of the stuff left behind the black hole, really giving clues about not only the activity now, but in the past, because V404 Cygni has had previous outbursts. I think one of the last ones was in 1938.
Yeah, exactly right. 38, 56, and 89. And they've all led to theories about what's going on, Brad.
And this is exactly right. So, we don't know we don't really know when it's going to happen. Obviously, those time differences, it's not happening every 20 years. It was kind of, 18 years between the first one and then 30 something years and another 30 years or so. So it's not really this common thing. So what is creating it? And we don't know when the next one's going to be. So you're going to have a lot of studying coming from this 2015 outburst, really seeing, all right, well, it's reasonable to expect in the next 10 to 30 years that we'll have another outburst. Well, then we can look at what happens there and try and get an idea of what is really going on. And, and we've talked about this before, looking at things like in the X-rays, they also use the Gamma Ray Observatory, the Neil Gehr Swift. You're able to see information because you're looking at different energies that would normally be invisible to the human eye.
And lastly this week, Brad, Virgin has a seat sale, but closed borders and COVID lockdowns aren't the only things holding us back from scooping up a bargain. It's the cool $450,000 price tag.
I guess you just gave away your secret of how much you're earning right now, since $450,000 is a bit out of your price range. But
it's the cost of my house at the moment.
Yeah, I know, seriously. And this is the comical. I've been wondering if it's comical, sad, or expected. I mean, we knew that after they would have their first flight, they would announce, hey, we're going to go gung-ho, we're going to sell seats, we're going with it. There was talk that they would raise the price, and there was even talk that it could be close to double it. And they have gone and confirmed that new seats, instead of costing the previous $250,000, are now at the price range of about $450,000 US, which is a little bit more than $250,000. But that's what I was thinking. If you can afford $250,000, maybe $450,000 isn't as big of a jump as it seems.
Exactly. It's like going from $5 to $10 for us, mere mortals.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Exactly. That's right. I now have 2 drinks instead of 1. So, and maybe that's the thinking, is with all of this demand, obviously they have mentioned that there's been a lot more customers who, after that first flight, wanted to book in. So maybe they realize they can raise the price, and maybe that price will go to future development, more craft, bigger craft. Who knows? But definitely a bit of a price hike. What I'm really interested to see is Blue Origin is not said what they are charging. They said maybe around $200,000 a few years ago. Again, I think that was partially just to undercut Virgin Galactic, which is pretty much their business model, is just undercut Virgin Galactic in every sense of the word. So are they going to go $400,000 now? We'll see what happens with Blue Origin as well. How do they respond to this? Because this really is the beginning of a new market.
Exactly right. And as you say, price rise of about $200,000. So I guess someone has to offset the test flight and the boss's seat. Not only that, but there are 3 options: buy 1 seat, buy a few together, or even rent out the entire flight. There's also opportunities for microgravity research and professional astronaut training. So we're starting to get an idea of the target market here.
Yeah, I mean, instead of a party bus, it's a party spacecraft. I never thought you would go for that market, but I guess Richard Branson is. They have Virgin Crew, so are they going to have Virgin Space Crews? And this really is the beginning of it. And as you said, because they're doing it a little bit differently than Blue Origin and SpaceX, who, yes, they're interested in some tourism and private people, but that actually isn't their main focus. Their main focus is on astronauts and sending craft and bidding on moon landers and launches, with Virgin Galactic really being this primary business model of what can they offer to private citizens. Maybe they're going to start expanding that a lot more and realize that is what they have, and this is what they're going to offer more. How do we give more options to a wider range of people, professional, private, and commercial, so that this becomes sustainable rather than, hey, people just buy it once, but pretty much we use up our clientele and then there's no longer any customers.
And just when you think who would actually buy these tickets, there are 600 sold already. So Branson and Virgin certainly onto a winner, and certainly a market for Blue Origin to sneak into as well.
That's exactly right. It's the fact is, this is not necessarily unique. As he said, there is a lot of people who are inquiring. Elon Musk, even, I think, has booked in. So, it's going to happen. I think, again, it's just how does the market and how does this whole new business evolve over time? And that's really what we're just now starting to see, is how this new business is created. Because that really is. It's what we're seeing is like the beginning of the airline industry back in the 20s, when planes were coming around and they're really starting to form what that business and that business model was. This is what is literally happening in our eyes. And this isn't going to end. This isn't going to be some sort of fad. They will expand it to bigger flights, more, crossing to the other parts of the earth, and then obviously further flight. There's only so many things that you can do now that this industry quite literally exists. How is this all going to play out? It is going to be interesting to see over the next decades.
It absolutely is. Now, you're sounding like a very busy man. So the last thing to do for today's show is to tell you about Talkin Science interview, the next one coming up. Dr. Judith Klatt is beaming in to discuss her theory about how the slowing of Earth's rotation, thanks to the increasing gravitational effect of the moon, led to more daylight, which in turn allowed more photosynthesis in early plants and algae.
So we can imagine this as structured microbial communities. We nowadays still find them, and don't find them pretty usually in extreme environments, but they were really important on an ancient Earth. So the thought was, how could day length have mattered for these systems and for their oxygen release into the atmosphere? And then we realized, well, there might be actually a link between day length and oxygen release, which is based on the physics of diffusion in these mats. And then we looked at the pattern of Earth's oxygenation and the pattern of Earth's rotation rate, and they were stunningly similar. So I was talking about this boring billion, and some models for Earth rotation rate actually suggest that during this boring billion, also day length was constant, right? So that we actually end up with patterns that are stunningly similar.
And that interview will be out Thursday at 12:30 p.m. GMT. Members have first play access right now. If you're in the future, the card is right here too on YouTube and, of course, on our website at trekzone.org. Brad, great to pick apart the stories of the week with you. We'll do it again next week.
Great.